This video is sponsored by Delete Me. For 3 months in 1939, the pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee attacked and disappeared like a ghost. 9 British merchant vessels vanished in the South Atlantic. No survivors, no wreckage, just silence. The Royal Navy deployed carriers and squadrons to hunt her down, but the raider was a master of disguise. Bolting on fake funnels, repainting turrets, and flying French flags until the moment she opened fire. Then, on December 13th, off the coast of Uruguay, Admiral Henry Harwood and his 3 British cruisers got what they wished for. They found her. In a blistering 80 minutes, Graf Spee made them wish they hadn't. Her 28-centimeter guns hurled shells from 22 miles away. She was faster, heavier, and more advanced than anything Harwood had. Sweat ran down his face as he stared at the odds. How do you defeat a warship that's never lost? Then it hit him. They didn't need to win the battle to defeat Graf Spee. Graf Spee used false structures and deceptive flags to mask her identity from the ever-present Royal Navy. Keeping your identity and privacy to yourself in today's digital age is just as challenging. Data brokers are legally permitted to harvest names, addresses, phone numbers, and family connections and trade them on the open market. They don't care who buys this information and what they do with it, leading to phishing, harassment, and unwanted exposure. We at Dark Seas were shocked when the initial privacy reports from Delete Me showed just how much of our history was available for purchase. Addresses and contact names, all available for a price. However, we used Delete Me to scrub that exposure, a hands-free subscription service that handles the difficult, time-consuming work of removing personal information from hundreds of data broker databases. To do so, we submitted our details once, and their team of privacy experts managed the entire process. Within 7 days, we received a report showing where our data was found. Because these databases are constantly being repopulated with new information, Delete Me continues to monitor and resubmit removal requests throughout the year, ensuring our data stays offline. They rely on real people, not just automation, to ensure the job is done right. If you too want to take your information out of the data brokers' auction houses, visit joindeleteme.com/darkseas and use promo code DARKSEAS for 20% off all consumer plans, or scan the QR code on screen. It was late 1914, and across Europe, fields burned as troops traded fire across the trenches. World War I had only just begun, yet the fighting was already spilling far beyond the continent's borders. Thousands of miles away, in the South Atlantic near Chile, the renowned German naval officer Maximilian von Spee had gathered a squadron of warships to challenge the Royal Navy. British cruisers prowled the coastlines, hunting down German vessels and cutting off supply routes that kept the Central Powers war machine alive. For over a century, the Royal Navy had ruled the oceans without suffering a major defeat since the days of Napoleon. But von Spee was not the kind of man to retreat from a fight. And when he encountered a British squadron on November 1st, his orders were simple: open fire. With the setting sun silhouetting his enemies and the Chilean coast concealing his own ships, von Spee managed to dodge incoming salvos and unleashed a devastating rain of fire in return. By nightfall, he had achieved the unthinkable: a German victory over the Royal Navy. 2 British cruisers went down during the battle, and more than 1,600 sailors perished. On the German side, only 3 men were wounded. Von Spee returned to port as a hero, greeted with flowers and celebration. Yet he never let triumph cloud his judgment. He knew the odds were stacked against him, and he would not live to see Germany's ultimate fate. As he put it, quote, "I must fight my way through the seas of the world, doing as much mischief as I can, until my ammunition is exhausted, or a foe far superior in power succeeds in catching me. But it will cost the wretches dearly before they take me down." That day came on December 8th, 1914, when the Royal Navy got its revenge at the Battle of the Falkland Islands. Remaining true to his duty, Spee led his cruisers into action once again. But this time, the enemy's force was overwhelming. Nearly the entire German squadron was sunk or scuttled, and around 1,900 men were lost, including Spee himself and his 2 sons, who went down beside him aboard his flagship, SMS Scharnhorst. That day, Germany lost one of its most promising naval leaders, and their troubles were barely starting. By the end of World War I, Germany had lost around 55 warships. Yet for the Allies, that was not enough. The ensuing armistice demanded that dozens of modern German vessels be scuttled. Only a handful survived, serving as the lone foundation to assemble a post-war fleet. It wasn't much, but in those desperate years, every single ship Germany could keep was more valuable than gold. In the summer of 1919, the infamous Treaty of Versailles was signed. The document had finally put an end to a war that had cost thousands of German lives, yet it had also cost the nation deeply. Germany was stripped of its territories, saddled with crushing reparations, forced to admit they were solely responsible for the war, and accept severe military restrictions. For the Navy, the limits were devastating. Just 6 pre-dreadnought battleships, 6 light cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 12 torpedo boats. No battleships could exceed the 10,000-ton mark. For comparison, before the war, the Imperial Navy had fielded the Bayern-class 30,000-ton giants, the most powerful ships the German Empire ever built. They became nothing more than a distant memory. The treaty went further still. Germany was also forbidden to possess submarines and limited to a token force of just 15,000 naval personnel, effectively shattering any hope of restoring the Navy's former glory. Resentment grew by the day. Within the Navy, some began to plan the creation of an entirely new class of vessels, one fast and lethal enough to rival enemy battleships and make Germany's enemies pay for what they had done to the country. The path to building a brand new German warship in the post-war years was anything but simple. The first obstacle was timing. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany had to wait until an existing vessel reached 20 years of age before it could be replaced. That meant no new ship could join the fleet until 1922, when the pre-dreadnought battleship SMS Preußen finally met the requirements. In the meantime, German planners wrestled with the question of what this new ship should be. The options were to either build a heavily armed but small and sluggish warship, or construct a large, fast vessel that carried only a modest amount of firepower. Neither choice would work. What the Navy needed was a design that could deliver a heavy punch, yet still escape across the seas unchallenged if the battle became too heated. It took nearly a decade to find the right balance, and each time engineers came close to a breakthrough, progress was stalled by economic hardship or political pushback, with German officials arguing that the nation needed to invest in its people, securing food for families before paying for a new naval weapon. Despite the challenges, by 1929, the Navy was finally able to lay down the Deutschland. The new vessel stretched nearly 600 feet with a beam of 67 feet. To save weight without sacrificing speed, engineers fitted her with 2 sets of diesel engines, making her one of the first fuel-only capital ships. She could cruise 20,000 miles at 13 knots, yet still push to 20 knots when needed. For defense, Deutschland carried an 80mm armored belt. But her true menace lay in her armament, a main battery of 6 28cm SKC-28 guns, capable of firing 600-pound shells at over 2,000 miles an hour, striking targets nearly 40,000 yards away. She was further equipped with 8 15cm guns, 10 2cm flak guns, 8 torpedo tubes, and 3 8.8cm anti-aircraft guns, which were later upgraded to modern versions. Though the ship in reality exceeded the 10,000-ton limit, clever engineering and compact design allowed Germany to report her as compliant, classifying Deutschland as a heavy cruiser and claiming she did not violate the tonnage limit for battleships. The Allies, unable to prove otherwise, did not contest it. From the moment Deutschland began her first test patrols, plans were already underway to expand her family. The Deutschland class grew to include 2 more vessels, Admiral Scheer, commissioned in 1934, and Admiral Graf Spee, which joined the German fleet in 1936 and was named after the German admiral who'd given his life decades earlier in the Battle of the Falklands. Graf Spee was made a flagship and quickly dispatched to the Spanish coast alongside her sister ships as the Spanish Civil War erupted. The conflict became the ultimate training ground for Hitler's forces. On land, in the air, and at sea, the Nazis tested new tactics and experimental weapons against the Republican defenders. Though officially neutral and tasked with intelligence gathering and refugee evacuations, the Deutschland-class cruisers kept their guns ready at all times, eager to prove just how far they could go. The chance came on May 29, 1937, when Deutschland was struck by Republican bombers and destroyers. Fuel tanks erupted, ammunition exploded, and 31 German sailors were lost to the fire. Hitler demanded that Admiral Scheer avenge her sister. Days later, the ship unleashed her guns on the port city of Almeria, pounding it into flames. The bombardment was so effective that Stalin, who had been supplying the Republicans with ships and aircraft of his own, ordered that no further attacks be carried out against German vessels. The Führer was now certain Germany's ships were ready for war. As Hitler prepared to unleash his armies across Europe, he positioned his prize ships at strategic locations for global commerce raiding. Deutschland was sent to patrol south of Greenland. Admiral Scheer stayed closer to home, guarding Wilhelmshaven. Admiral Graf Spee received the most ambitious assignment of all, a journey to the South Atlantic to hunt down British ships carrying supplies from South America back to Europe. Days before Hitler invaded Poland, Admiral Graf Spee, under the command of Captain Hans Wilhelm Langsdorff, left port and began her journey south. Langsdorff had already proven himself. Respected by his peers for his service at the Battle of Jutland in World War I, he'd even earned the Iron Cross second class. But aboard Graf Spee, he was venturing into uncharted waters. This mission would take him far from home, away from German vessels that might come to his aid. To make matters worse, he was initially forbidden from firing a single shot, even after the British Admiralty ordered its fleet to, quote, commence hostilities at once against Germany. It was simply too soon, and Hitler still clung to the hope of a quick peace deal with the Allies, and until that illusion was shattered, Graf Spee's guns would remain out of commission. With the ship's armament bound, Langsdorff and his crew could only hope that by sailing far from Europe, they might avoid conflict until the long-awaited green light arrived. However, less than a month at sea, the lookouts aboard Graf Spee's float plane rang the alarm. A British heavy cruiser was closing fast. A head-to-head battle was out of the question, and so Langsdorff ordered the engines to fire at top speed. Graf Spee darted forward, her crew anxiously scanning the horizon, praying the hunter wouldn't catch up. Mile after mile carried them deeper into hostile waters, where the enemy could strike from any direction. This was not what Graf Spee had been built for. But before despair could set in, the message Langsdorff had been waiting for finally arrived. Hitler had abandoned hope of peace with Britain. Now Graf Spee was free to strike. The timing was perfect. Shortly after the go-ahead, Langsdorff spotted a silhouette ahead. An unlucky British cargo ship, sailing at the wrong place at the wrong time. British Captain Charles Frederick Harris was operating the steamship Clement off the coast of Brazil when his radio operators received a worrisome transmission. A voice with a German accent warned them not to use the system to reveal their position or call for help. As the words crackled through the speakers, the men on deck began to catch a glimpse of a warship charging toward them. It was Graf Spee. Harris knew Clement could never outrun the German raider, but he would be damned if he went down without standing up against the Kriegsmarine. Ignoring the warning, he ordered his operator to send one last call, telling anyone who would listen that their ship was under attack. As the message went out, a shadow swept across the deck. It was an Arado AR-196 float plane, sent straight from Graf Spee's catapult to warn the sailors. The Germans were not playing around. The aircraft dived low, raking the ship with machine gun fire. 7.92mm rounds combed the decks, forcing sailors to scramble for cover. Harris knew that no help would come in time. Still, there was one final duty he had to obey before his ship went down. Amid the chaos, he shouted for his men to seize as many of the ship's sensitive documents as they could grab and heave them overboard, ensuring nothing useful would fall into Nazi hands. Papers were still scattering into the wind when Graf Spee arrived. The crew was defenseless as German sailors boarded with rifles leveled at them. Luckily for the British, Langsdorff was under orders not to sink any vessels before first inspecting them for contraband and evacuating all men on board. Harris was told to step forward. He would be coming with the Germans. The rest of the crew was placed in lifeboats and pointed toward Brazil. From Graf Spee's deck, Harris watched his ship one last time, as torpedoes and heavy shells thundered into Clement until the steamer broke apart and slipped beneath the waves, the first Allied merchant sunk by Germany in the war. Before leaving the crime scene, Longsdorff transmitted a message to the port ahead to ensure the lifeboats would be rescued. He could be ruthless, yet for his honor in combat, he would be later referred to by the British as, quote, a head-to-toe gentleman. Still, as he transmitted this final message, he used the call sign of Admiral Scheer to mislead Allied intelligence. After all, he was still a Nazi. Back in Allied command, alarms rang out as reports from the South Atlantic arrived. The British knew Graf Spee had to be stopped before she claimed more victims. Joining forces with the French Navy, they assembled a hunting group of aircraft carriers, battle cruisers, and battleships to sweep the seas off South America. Among the force was the heavy cruiser HMS Exeter, an 8,000-ton ship armed with 203mm guns and twin banks of triple torpedo tubes. She was joined by two Lender-class light cruisers, HMS Ajax and HMNZS Achilles, each packed with 150 and 100mm guns. Together, under the command of Admiral Sir Henry Harwood, they were tasked with patrolling the waters off the River Plate between Argentina and Uruguay, ensuring the British forces covered as many vital ports as possible. Even then, the German ship proved to be one of the slipperiest ships the Royal Navy had ever pursued. Longsdorff had ordered his men to disguise Graf Spee's silhouette, adding a fake gun turret and even a second funnel to mimic an Allied warship. The ruse worked, and many victims did not realize the danger until the last moment, when Graf Spee revealed her true identity, and it was already too late. Throughout October, the raider captured or sank 5 vessels before darting toward the African coast, throwing her pursuers off the trail. Despite storms and constant evasions to avoid Allied patrols, Longsdorff continued to rack up victories. By early December, Graf Spee had sunk 9 merchant ships. The number of prisoners swelled so high that Longsdorff was forced to transfer them regularly to the oiler Altmark, which shifted from supply ship to floating prison. The Allies were desperate. Nothing seemed to stop the German raider. But just when all hope seemed to be lost, there was a breakthrough. The steamer SS Doric Star, one of Graf Spee's latest victims, had managed to transmit her position before going under. Analyzing the signal, British command concluded the raider's next target would likely be in the waters off northern Brazil. Orders went out to redirect ships to intercept, but Admiral Harwood, who was still stationed with his group near the River Plate area, thought differently. He suspected Longsdorff would head south instead, straight toward his location. Trusting his instincts, Harwood kept his cruisers in place, waiting for Graf Spee to walk into his trap. Harwood's instincts were soon proven right. Among the intelligence recovered from one of his latest captures, Captain Longsdorff had learned that the waters off Uruguay were heavily trafficked by merchant vessels. He believed he could secure a few more victories there before returning to Germany for badly needed repairs. As Graf Spee approached the area, the crew warned Longsdorff that their float plane, so vital for reconnaissance and pre-boarding strikes, was no longer operational. If they engaged again, they would be fighting blind. Longsdorff dismissed the concern. By now, he believed Graf Spee was practically untouchable. At dawn on December 13th, Longsdorff sighted what he thought was his next prey, a lone convoy ripe for the taking. But as the distance closed, the Germans realized these were no helpless merchants. It was Harwood's hunting pack, guns already pointed at Graf Spee. It was too late to turn back. Longsdorff gave the order to open fire, but the British were ready. Harwood ordered his cruisers to split, forcing the Germans to focus on one group while the other closed in. Longsdorff had no choice but to concentrate on the heavier Exeter. The two ships exchanged fire, Exeter's crew fighting desperately to keep Graf Spee occupied, while Ajax and Achilles struck from the flank. The British managed several hits, but Graf Spee's heavier guns soon crippled Exeter, smashing her turrets and setting her bridge ablaze. Barely able to keep steady, the cruiser was forced to break off. That left the smaller vessels to face Graf Spee alone. Ajax and Achilles fought savagely, landing hit after hit, even as their own decks and batteries were shattered. Graf Spee might have been capable of destroying them, but Longsdorff hesitated. His ship, too, was bleeding. She'd taken some 70 direct hits. Fires raged below decks, and vital systems were failing. To keep the fight going meant risking his entire crew. He ordered a withdrawal, steering for port before another salvo could leave the ship dead in the water. Argentina, with its German-friendly government, would have been ideal, but the way to port was through shallow waters filled with clay that threatened to trap them and leave them stranded. That left Uruguay as their only hope. With Graf Spee battered and limping, Langsdorff could only hope the officials in Montevideo would allow a Nazi warship to remain in harbor long enough to make her seaworthy again. The moment Langsdorff and his men disembarked in Montevideo, they were met by the German ambassador to Uruguay, Otto Lungmann. He did not soften the truth, telling the sailors, quote, "I wish I could tell you welcome to Uruguay, gentlemen, but you have just made a grave mistake by bringing the ship here looking for help." Diplomatic tensions were at an all-time high. The Germans begged for Graf Spee to remain in port for at least 15 days of repairs, but British pressure weighed heavily on the Uruguayan government. Officials delivered a harsh ultimatum: leave within 72 hours or prepare to be interned. The only way to survive was to make one last attempt to reach Argentina. Yet intelligence reports and newspapers claimed a powerful British squadron already lay in wait just off the shore, ready to finish the job the moment Graf Spee left port. In truth, the heaviest British ships were still days away, but the Allies had managed to stage a deception campaign, convincing enough to lead Langsdorff to believe he was hopelessly surrounded. Unwilling to risk his crew or let Graf Spee fall into enemy hands, Langsdorff made the decision no captain ever wishes to face. He would scuttle his ship. On December 17th, 1939, Graf Spee met her end. Like the admiral she was named after, she'd enjoyed a short yet remarkable wartime career, scoring victories that shook the Allies before being cut down just as the battle was starting to pick up. From the shores of Montevideo, more than 20,000 people watched as explosions tore through the ship. Flames erupted skyward, shattering windows across the city. A black plume of smoke towered miles into the sky as the wreck burned for days. Her crew saluted the vessel one last time with raised arms. Langsdorff, his eyes clouded with tears, could barely bring himself to look. Days later, in Buenos Aires, he wrote his final letters to family and command, expressing, quote, "A captain cannot separate his own fate from that of his ship. I can do no more for my ship's company. I'm fully content to pay with my life for any possible discredit on the honor of the flag." 3 days after scuttling his ship, Langsdorff took his own life. And with him ended the story of Admiral Graf Spee. Our sponsor, Delete Me, handles the tedious work of scrubbing your private details from data broker databases, helping reduce your exposure and digital risk without the manual effort. Visit joindeleteme.com/darkseas and use promo code DARKSEAS for 20% off all consumer plans, or scan the QR code on screen.